If you're enjoying the Trees and Lines podcast, please head over to our Trees and Lines LinkedIn page and give us a follow. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of the Trees and Lines podcast. Gregory Chun, Supervisor for Vegetation Management of Hawaiian Electric, joins us to discuss working in their unique environment, how they are solving for workforce challenges, and how Lahaina is recovering from the massive wildfire. Have a listen. Hope you enjoy. Today we welcome Greg Chun to our podcast. Greg, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, appreciate your joining us. Hey, Greg, to get things started, why don't you just give the audience a little bit rundown of who you are, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about your role there at Hawaiian Electric.
Okay, Greg Chun. I'm the Supervisor for Vegetation Management for Hawaiian Electric Company. So as of probably 2020 or so, my responsibilities encompass supervising all of our vegetation management operations on all three counties for Hawaiian Electric, which is Hawaii County, Maui County, and Honolulu County, which is island of Oahu.
Are those three separate companies, or?
They are all three under Hawaiian Electric, but they are geographically separate just because of islands and oceans and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah.
So the 5 separate islands, because Maui County encompasses island of Maui and Lanai and Molokai as well.
Okay, so you cover both distribution and transmission?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, about how big a program is that?
As far as mileage, I'd say overall mileage is a little over 3,000 miles, probably like 3,500 or so, something like that, if you combine our transmission and distribution.
Yeah.
So mileage-wise, I'd say we're fairly on the small side, but it's just a diverse area, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I see that lush plants in the background there. So tell us about what are some of the challenges of working in that tropical island?
Probably the biggest one, as you can guess, is the growth rate, which is phenomenal. I mean, vines, bamboo, lots of our trees. I mean, we'd be hard-pressed to get 4 to 6 months of clearance on certain species. And even the ones that are quote-unquote normally growing, I mean, if we can't get back to them in 12 to 18 months, then we're looking at issues.
So 4 to 6 months. Do you inspect every 4 months?
Yeah, that's a hard bargain with the amount of resources we have. I mean, we have, including myself on Oahu, 4 arborists. There's only 1 arborist in Maui County and 1 arborist with a little bit of contract help on Hawaii Island. So we are pretty strapped as far as manpower goes on the company side.
Greg, great to meet you. I guess one thing I did want to say, before we did jump in, this is our first recording since the fires in LA. So we do want to send our kind of prayers and thoughts to everyone affected by that. Obviously,
of course,
not something that you're not familiar with. And today we wanted to, focus in a little bit on, as kind of Phil already, entered the conversation with the challenges that you guys face and the terrible tragedy that you had to deal with. Certainly not easy to solve for when you're under-resourced and undercapitalized. So I did see that there's quite a large sum of capital coming your way to the region. That's, I think, FEMA-oriented capital.
Yeah, we have some federal grant money that's coming in. Mm-hmm. And that is specifically supposed to help us target hazard tree removal.
Okay. So just from a timeline perspective, Greg, maybe you can take us through. So you were there, right, during this whole period in some capacity? Take us through a little bit of the mindset of someone that has to deal with, I guess an event that is so nuts and out of control and of such a scale. What's the, maybe just take us through the lens from your perspective on what you're going through in that process.
Yeah. And it's kind of, I'd say, surreal to kind of in a sense, because I think just like LA, Lahaina happened like very, very quickly. And before you knew it, it was like
Out of control.
a disaster, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just hard to kind of put your hands around that, is how quickly everything spread and just the amount of just sheer devastation that happened, occurred. And we've had a Hawaiian Electric on Maui. It's like there's people that that live there, and you're just hoping they made it out safely.
Yeah.
And luckily, all of our people did. So, I mean, that was a blessing in there. I mean, but they did, of course, lose basically everything. The place to live and stability. And some of them are probably still, they're displaced, right? They don't have a place to go back home to yet.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to move forward as best you can under those kinds of very difficult circumstances.
I was there this spring, and I was a bit surprised that it just first time I'd been there since the fire, at how slow it seemed the restoration was. And I don't know what my expectations were, but can you update us on that? Where do things stand?
Actually, I'm not a real aware of what they're doing. I know in the direct aftermath, there was basically a period of time that we weren't allowed into the burn zone. And once restoration was starting to kind of roll forward, then that's when we as vegetation, we were tasked to help to kind of clear for the new poles and lines that they were installing. And that's our involvement in that. But as far as infrastructure going there, I'm not super aware of what's going on, because as you can imagine, there's not a whole lot of vegetation left in that area. And the west side of Maui is on the drier side. So the vegetation that is there is lower and slower growing for the most part. So there's, right now, we haven't been pulled into a whole lot as far as the new infrastructure that's being planned. And I don't know if there is even a concrete plan for that yet. There's a lot of discussion between community leaders, government, all that kind of stuff that needs to happen before, I guess, a meaningful restoration plan goes forward.
Yeah, pretty daunting to rebuild an entire community.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as you've seen in LA and what we saw in Lahaina, that, I mean, it's just to bare rubble, basically, almost, in a lot of cases.
Yes, it sounds like you guys are in the infancy of kind of rebuilding infrastructure. Have you started to kind of rethink a vegetation strategy to sort of account for this? Or is that just a function of more money, more strategy?
So I don't know if you're aware, but we did recently release a wildfire safety strategy that we're filing with our PUC. So that's like I guess you would say the beginning portions of the plan. I mean, of course, the plan will and has to evolve and change over time. But that is like the foundations of what our thought process is going forward. But it does incorporate a lot of ideas from other portions of the country, because they've gone through it before. So we're leaning on that kind of expertise.
Through the kind of continental US, you mean?
Yes. So we've developed that strategy with the help of contractors and consultants, and combining that with our own local knowledge and knowledge of the system to come up with something that hopefully works for us, but it will have to evolve and change over time as we learn through our process how things work.
Most of your tree work is done by contract vendors, is that
100% of it? Yes.
Yeah. So I remember years ago, I used to be with a company that provided contract arborists, and everybody fought to go to Hawaii to get that assignment. But I could never get them to stay in Hawaii. So what's the workforce challenges there?
So you've nailed it on the head. It's like everybody would like to be here for probably a short amount of time, but it's I don't know. Some people might call it island fever. I guess you would say that's kind of like a term that's for people that not used to being confined to a smaller geographic location, and the only way to get off or out is by flying. And so and by flying to the nearest U.S. state, that's like 5.5 hours. And if you have family, you don't have family on the island, then it's hard. You get isolated pretty quickly if you're not finding people to hang out with, or culturally it's different, of course. Hawaii is a melting pot of many different cultures, and all that melting together, it can be daunting to somebody who's not used to that. So of course it's a beautiful place to live.
Yeah,
it's sunshine, trade winds, but cost of living, as you can imagine, it's quite high as well. So that there are challenges in that respect. And housing, we're probably in the top 5, probably as far as housing goes, as far as lack of affordability. And we have lots of multi-generational houses where people can't afford to buy a house on their own, so they're living with uncles, aunties, moms, dads, grandparents. So we are so condensed, so that if you're used to having like an acre of land, you're not going to find that here, not at a price that you can afford anyway.
Right.
Yeah. No, completely understand. So tell us a little bit, Greg, about like how you guys are structured organizationally. The vegetation group, does that fall under like an asset management? Like, what is the organizational structure in terms of?
We're in the operations division of Hawaiian Electric. So our vice president is the vice president of energy delivery.
Got it. Okay.
And then there's a senior vice president of operations, which includes energy delivery and power supply, and then up to there, our CEO.
Yep. And can you remind us again, how long have you been in your current role, and how long have you been involved with Hawaii's UVM program?
So as the supervisor, I've been the supervisor for all 3 counties since 2020. But prior to that, I was the supervisor for just Oahu, and have been in that role since 2011. And prior to that, I was with Hawaiian Electric as a system arborist since 2006.
Okay.
And prior to that, I was at one of the contractors that Phil talks about. I was with Davey Tree for close to a decade, working in Hawaii. Started as a climber, worked my way up to foreman and general foreman.
So you grew up there, you don't get island fever?
I guess no. I went to school in the mainland and came back home. So so I've worked in a small amount of time as a consultant or contractor for PG&E, small amount of time as a contractor for a small utility in Washington State.
I'm guessing, PG&E, probably Edison, a lot of the West Coast utilities like rich in vegetation, Puerto Rico, even Luma. Those are probably areas and utilities that you're sourcing information from, I would imagine.
Yes. And and consultants that probably do business with all of those and above and more.
Yeah. It's it's a very interesting time that we're in, right? I can tell you that, as through my travels and Phil's travels around the country, the discussion around wildfire risk mitigation, is happening with every utility in the most unlikely places. And so unfortunately what just happened in Los Angeles, it just really kind of hammers home the point, right? What happened, with the PG&E fires some years ago, and then with you guys, and now with what's happening in LA, is just events are, can be just so disabling. And they have such a trickle down effect things like insurance are going to become a real big issue, not just from homeowners' perspective, but the ability to work with a utility and how that impacts labor and, the rebuilding processes and the cost and inflation that's going to create for electricity prices and gas prices and infrastructure. So, there's just this insane sort of momentum, negative momentum that is just unbelievable.
It's kind of scary to think about if you encompass all of that and how that affects our ability to do work, really. Bottom line,
right.
Boots on the ground.
That's exactly right.
You talked about the population density, but across you got to have a lot of remote areas, right? Really hard to access.
Especially our transmission. I mean, we're not flat, that's for sure. We have a lot of mountainous territory, so there are structures that are available to us only by helicopter. So we have to arrange that, and lots of our hikes for our transmission lines can be like an hour plus just to get to where the work is. Like in the line that goes to Hana in Maui, there are like several structures that just pop from ridge top to ridge top to ridge top to ridge top. So working on one ridge top take you like close to half a day to get in. Then maybe you got to leave your equipment there if you're not able to get done by the end of the day, and hike out, hike back in, and do that multiple times for each ridge top. So it's challenging in a lot of cases. And as small as the islands are, I mean, we do have a very diverse environmental climate. So, I mean, like I said, the west side of most of our islands is pretty dry. So then growth pattern is a lot different than, say, the windward side of our island, which gets a lot more rain, most of our trade winds, and growth patterns, species. I mean, it runs the gamut, really. So,
yeah. So are you relying a lot on technology these days?
So we have used LiDAR to identify a lot of our defects, I guess, or encroachments on our transmission lines. But as you know, LiDAR can be quite spendy. So, and with our growth rates, it's like we would have, I mean, we have trouble keeping up with all the encroachments that are identified with the amount of resources we have.
4 months to re-encroach, you probably don't get your data back that fast.
No, we don't. But I mean, the vines and bamboo, I mean, a lot of those, we, for the most part, know where they are. So,
Greg, I have found, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this, that typically post-event, depending on whether it's a hurricane or a fire, whatever the case is, there tends to be a greater investment and understanding in vegetation management, right? Because it feels like for many years, especially within the utility, it's something that definitely don't want to call it an afterthought, but I want to call it something that's like an embedded sort of program and something you kind of have to do. But are you finding that there's a greater interest and a greater willingness to understand all the ways that you can structure a program like the one that you're overseeing in order to be a little bit more proactive and preventative?
With our wildfire safety strategy, that is definitely the case. I mean, they are allocating additional resources and funds to hopefully reduce our risk, I should say, in the higher tier wildfire categories.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's in and of itself will help us, just because, like I've said before, the resources are limited, and our growth rate is so high. It's just
you're overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to keep up.
Yeah, you guys have a very unique challenge. It's probably even a greater challenge than Puerto Rico. The distance alone, for probably resources to make a commitment, the travel, the costs associated with it, definitely puts you in a very precarious position.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, like even if we had like a large infusion of money tomorrow, just the amount of time it would take to get research on the ground, it's still months and months away.
Yeah.
So it's there's a delay reaction for when we can spend versus when we actually get working with the money that we can spend with.
Yeah.
So the planning on that makes it difficult. I mean, especially if we don't like to do the whole ramp up, ramp down, because in Hawaii, that's the mobilization and demobilization of equipment becomes cost prohibitive, and we don't get good value. So we'd like to keep it as
sustainable,
just sustain level set as much as possible.
Yeah.
And growing our workforce. I mean, we'd like to do it more organically, and so that we can not have to bring outside resources in if we needed, if we had to, or if we do bring them in, it's on temporary. But then we have to understand that if we do bring outside resources in, then those temporary resources are going to come at a premium, of course. But it does, and then that means a lot of those crews won't be able to do like aero lift truck work because there's no aero lifts for them to be in, and then you got to ship them down. So
are you help me understand this a little bit, and I'm sure like some of our audience may have similar questions. Obviously US state, so many things apply, but in terms of like oversight, PUCs, FERC, NERC, regulatory bodies, can we assume that how you operate, how you ask for money, how you engage with risk oversight is consistent with every mainland state? Or are you governed a little bit differently?
We are governed slightly differently since we are not bound by FERC and NERC. But we're basically self-contained, right?
Got it.
So, but we do probably use FERC and NERC as a guideline as best management practice, but we're not legally bound to do so. I mean, we have our state PUC, so that's our main interaction as far as requesting for funds and how we get our funding as a company that's not from our shareholders.
Yeah, but you guys do kind of track and mimic NERC and FERC, from a standards perspective and how to govern.
Yeah, assets. As best we can.
As best you can, yeah. It's so fascinating because you guys are self-contained, and your problem set, though what seems similar to the rest of the country is more complex because you can't just turn on a dime, it feels like, and say, okay, like you said, if I got a huge infusion of capital that doesn't necessarily change outcome like overnight, you can't pivot that quickly. That makes it, I'm sure, very, very frustrating.
Yeah, we are like a large container ship, I guess. When you turn, it takes a while to turn.
Right. No, it sounds like that. So demographically, are the folks that are working in your group, are they locals? Like, are they from the islands? Do you have people? Arborists, like your internal staff.
So my internal staff, I guess, that's a good question. I mean, they are local in the sense that they've been here for a while, but their education, all of them, including myself, were educated in other parts of the United States.
But did they like you? I'm assuming were born on one of the islands, correct?
Yeah. So I think all my arborists, except for maybe one, were not born in Hawaii.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the local workforce, I would say a good percent, like a very large percentage, is born and raised in Hawaii.
Are you able to share generally where your budgets sit? What kind of dollars are we looking at to run a program like yours?
Right now, for our routine maintenance program, I'd say for all three counties, it's about $20 million.
That's transmission, distribution.
Yeah, herbicide spraying, all of it.
One of the big themes, and something that we hear that's discussed a lot now, is really how PUCs are more open to how dollars are bucketed into like more of the capital side of things, like how you can, defer work, but get a bunch of stuff done, defer some of that cost and minimize the direct impact on ratepayers. Is that something that you guys also do? Like what you're talking about is your routine budget, right? Not your capital budget.
Yeah, and our capital budget, it varies year to year, and I think, understandably, because of our situation currently, a lot of our capital projects have been probably deferred for quite some time. So
that's all rebuild, right?
Yeah, and that's just a little bit out of my wheelhouse as far as how that gets determined.
Yep. So if you were to market your program to mainland arborists and the industry, and if you were to say, hey, my island, my program, my state is a draw, outside of the obvious, which is beautiful and lovely, like how would you attract talent to come and stay?
That's a good question. I struggle with that a lot because I'm not sure if our pay is all that much better than, like, say, what they can get in California. So I can't really say that. Working conditions are great. I mean, people are great. I mean, like you said, our it can't be beat, really. I mean, but
yeah,
as far as the work itself, I mean, you get to work with probably trees you've never worked with before.
Yeah.
And lots of different wood composition, how it reacts to loading and all that kind of stuff, just the learning process. It like anybody that's going to any new environment, they're going to have to learn species composition and how it works and reacts. But it's going to be worlds different than what anybody used to probably in the continent of the United States. So it'll be a challenge, but probably a challenge a lot of people in the tree industry are more so on the risk-taking capabilities.
Yeah.
As far as adventurousness, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
So it would be an adventure.
I saw that you have some affiliation with University of Hawaii. Is that right?
As far as, what do you mean?
Like, do you guys do research with them? Are they a contributor to parts of your program or studies?
Not necessarily, no. But I know we utilized their expertise when we were formulating our wildfire safety strategy, because one of the main people, the research person, is from University of Hawaii. That we used as data gathering and building our model and all that kind of stuff, as far as where the tiers would be and how fire can and maybe could spread in certain areas. I mean, we utilize them for that, for sure.
You mentioned herbicide uses. I would think environmental issues are part of your company's priorities.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you have restrictions on that herbicide use, or how's that? What are you doing?
I think certain counties are much more sensitive to their use, particularly Maui County. So we just have to make sure we are following label directions to the T, and we don't utilize anything that's restricted use anyway. So most of our stuff, it's going to be on the low impact side. To begin with, it's like a small percentage of, most of it's just surfactant, really. But low percentages of herbicide. And we found it works pretty well for the lower grossing species anyway.
Is there anything unusual, given the region, regarding right-of-ways, easements, what you can control, what the engagement like is with landowners, homeowners? Like, what does that look like?
Our easements are, I guess, probably similar to a lot of utility. It is very wide and varied, the width and our rights in those easements. And typically our easement language is pretty vague, but I think that's probably purposeful, just to give us a little bit of leeway. Either way, but as far as like landowners, it can be challenging, especially now. the sensitivity to fire and fuel, right? So it's just a matter of, in all of these remote locations, what do you do with all the fuel that you are potentially creating, and their sensitivity to having the fuel there. But I mean, it's kind of a catch-22. Is like, if you leave it there, then there are going to be outages and potential fires that way. So, but if you're pruning and removing limbs and debris, and in these remote areas, you're doing slash control that way. And lopping and scattering, it reduces the fuel load in a sense, but it's still fuel. So there's sensitivity there.
Yeah.
And there's challenges in that respect. So that's an ongoing issue that we have with landowners as well.
Tough question, unfortunately, but do you think with what's happening in LA that the for lack of a better term, PTSD, and, has it brought, like, sometimes an event takes place, there's a reaction, there's capital, we're going to do this, we're going to apply resources, and then things kind of slow down, right? Because you're kind of falling back into the routine and work needs to get done. Has this kind of reaccelerated any things that may have been slowed down in terms of initiatives and deployment?
I think it's brought it probably closer to the surface to where we are going to have to discuss it and figure out a strategy going forward. Because it's got to be, in my opinion, I mean, it can't all fall on the utility. It's got to be a cooperation with all parties involved.
Yep. No, absolutely. Well, Greg, honestly, like, pleasure to meet you, and we really appreciate you taking some time and chatting with us, and giving us an opportunity to learn a little bit about what's going on in Hawaii, and
it's such a unique place.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for reaching out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we look forward to maybe talking with you on some other issues, and maybe getting a little deeper on one or two other topics. But this was a great introductory sort of conversation for our audience and for the people on the mainland to get a little bit of a peek into an area that is not only beautiful but has had its own challenges. And again, in light of what's going on in Los Angeles, it's great to build some understanding and awareness for folks. So thanks for taking the time.
Well, thank you guys.
I have to think about that 4-month growth period.
Not everything, but a lot of it, or some of it anyway.
Cut the stem and stand back so you don't get hit.
That's it for this episode of Trees and Lines, brought to you by Iapetus Holdings. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.